Great to be here. Ken, thank you for inviting me. And everybody, thank you for your time. And Michael, once more, thank you for your introduction. There was a lot of information there. I'm not really sure I can cover everything in 20 minutes, but I'll do my best. I'll start off with the coordinates. Aside from what Michael told you, I am 48 years old. I'm Dutch by origin, living in Stockholm, and I have a career in sales. So that's why it says emotional intelligence in sales. I work as a sales leader, consultant, and trainer. That's what I've done so far. I'm also a speaker, and one of my areas of profession, so to say, is emotional intelligence, and the other one, intuition. We also have a dog. It's called Lagotto. It's called Chico. It's a Lagotto. It's an Italian water dog. It doesn't like water, but he has a fantastic nose and he has fantastic senses. And Chico and I have a lot of things in common. I don't mind being compared to dogs. There's something very beautiful in dogs. Among other, their sixth sense. I will leave the coordinates at that, except for one more thing. For a couple of years now, I'm feeling a pull towards Arizona. I had no clue why, only that Arizona looks very nice. It looks like old-fashioned Indian land, you know, the cowboys and the Indians. I grew up reading those books, old chatter, well, I don't know anymore, cowboys and Indians at least. And I was always cheering for the Indians. I was always picturing myself as being one of them, and I practiced how to crawl and to make no sounds in a forest. And that pull has become stronger throughout the years. Until recently, I learned that there is something called Sedona in Arizona. And I now know very strongly I have to go there for some reason. And I've always known that. I have to go to the US. And when I did, I met my wife. So the next time I go to the US, who knows what I'm going to meet? Those were the coordinates about me. I will start off with a story. Roughly in 2004, about 1 year in when I came to Sweden. So my wife and I, we first lived in Holland for 2 years near Amsterdam, and then we moved to Sweden, Stockholm in 2003. And roughly 1 year later, I'll start with that story. It's a real life story. A friend of mine had invited me to come north of Stockholm, 6 hours drive, where we would stay over with one of his friends. And I will start there. I'm in that house, and we are sleeping over. And I'm sleeping in the living room. And my friend at my side, somewhere at the wall, he was deeply asleep. And in the middle of the night, I wake up. I have no clue why, really, but I just woke up. And I notice it's dark, it's silent. And I'm listening to the sounds of this house. And then all of a sudden, I hear some noise coming from the master bedroom, where the father and his daughter were sleeping. He was divorced, so he's by himself with his daughter. The daughter was roughly 7, 8 years old. And when I heard small footsteps coming from that room, I knew it was her. And I thought, well, she's probably going to the toilet. Although I knew better that she wasn't. I knew it was the girl, and I knew she was coming to my bed. Which she did. She was walking to my bed, standing at my foot end, not saying a word, just standing there, breathing. And I was laying on my back, eyes closed, pretending I was asleep. But I don't think she believed it. And so we were being in that moment for a while. My heart was beating fast. I was feeling extremely uncomfortable. Why? You don't know yet. You will find that out later. And at some point, I looked at her. Well, you may not really think what's so exciting about this story. Well, I have to reverse. Roughly 6 weeks before that, I had a dream. And in my dream, I had a daughter, which we didn't have. My wife and I, at that point, were very much looking forward to receive a baby, but we didn't. And I wanted a daughter. And in my dream, I had a daughter. And in that dream, she was 7, 8 years old. But I didn't like her. I didn't like her at all. I disliked her strongly. So she was very nasty and highly energetic and uncontrollable. I just didn't like my own child in my own dream. So when I woke up, that was the kind of dream that stuck with me. And it gave me a bit of a bad feeling. Why didn't I like my daughter? When my friend drove me to his friend's house and we entered that house, the first thing that I noticed was that the father's little girl ran into us. And that was the girl for my dreams, for my dream. So that was the moment where something struck me. I had dreamt about that girl, and there she was standing right there in the door. And I didn't really like the girl either in real life. It didn't become very much better that she was real. I was really off balance that day. And basically, I just wanted to go home. I didn't like the house. I didn't like the father. I didn't like the girl. I didn't like being there. I was sort of off balance the whole evening. We ate, we drank, we talked with each other. There were other guests as well. I mean, everybody had left. Finally, I could go to sleep. I just wanted to go to sleep and the next day go home. So when I finally fell asleep, that's the moment when I woke up, hearing the girl coming to my bed, standing there, not saying a word, just standing there. And in that very moment, I knew I had to do something. So I raised my head and I looked at the girl and I said in Swedish, "Hi." That's all I said. She answered. And then after that, she went back to her father's room. I went back to sleep. So this was, well, 2004. And if I move forward to today, if I look back on that dream, there are two lessons learned for me. The first lesson is that it was a clear sign, a sort of confirmation to me, at least, that some dreams are true and that there is a gift in it. There's a gift of intuition, even if it's unconscious intuition. Intuition works anyway. And it was sort of to prove, because I need proof of stuff often. And this was sort of the universe telling me clearly, here, you've got the proof. I mean, if you dream of a person that you have never known before, how much more proof do you want? The other lesson learned, I learned it for a couple of weeks ago, thanks to Ken, is to keep my personality out of judgment of people, because I instantly didn't like that person. And it's about self-control, talking about emotional intuition. So I know that we only have 20 minutes, not even sure how long I have been speaking right now. But as a child, I was highly intuitive. As a young man, I stopped that away, because at workforce in the Netherlands and even in Sweden, you're not supposed to be intuitive. You're supposed to be data-driven and conformative. And, in a conservative environment, it's all about data, logic. And my environment was sales. So even though you use your intuition, you're supposed to talk KPIs. So I tucked it away. And roughly the last 10 years or 20 years, actually, slowly but gradually, after a burnout, looking to myself, looking more inwardly, feeling in what my body wants, my intuitive muscle has been growing. And for 2 years ago, I decided I'm going to do something with it. It's time. I felt the calling. It's my calling to be on my passion, to really, really, really feel that silk thread going through your body, be on it, feel it, how it vibrates when you're doing something that really matters to you, when it's really, really purposeful. That feeling I want to give to others as well. That's why I'm doing this. And in the meantime, create a community. So not being by myself, doing this together. I'm also blessed or cursed, whatever you like, with the indigo energies. I'm sure you have heard about indigo. Since the 1970s, indigo children have been coming more and more to Earth, and they have this purplish field of energy in them. And if you can read books about those indigo kids, well, I was one of them, and I still am one of them. And it's not always fun, because indigo energy is non-conformative. Indigo energy is challenging, is changing, is bumping into stuff. And unfortunately, a lot of indigo kids end up as dropouts, burnouts, depressed, on medicines. So for me, it hasn't been much different in the sense that the first 50 or so, well, the first 30, 40 of my years were a lot of conflict and friction with society as a whole. I simply didn't like society. Now I'm older, hopefully wiser, calmer. I'm trying to change the world in another way. So in terms of intuition, I would start, I can introduce you to something that I call scanning the day. What I've been doing for a very long time for myself, and what I at least try to teach others if they are interested. The scanning the day is creating a mental image of your calendar, I mean, of your diary. You can see that right in front of you. It starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And it's almost like going with your finger through those calendar moments and just feel in how it feels and if there's a blocker or something. So if that finger just falls through, there's no blocker. I ask myself, is there any blocker today? If the feeling is not there, there's nothing to worry about. But sometimes my feeling stops somewhere, like 8 o'clock, I have to wake up a child. Okay, he's going to have a difficult morning. Or 9 o'clock, that meeting. Immediately I feel a blocker. It literally blocks my finger. The energy blocks the flow. Then I know there's something there. And then I zoom into it. What does my feeling tell me when I zoom in on that blocker? And you would be surprised how much you can get out of that. Specific stuff, certain people, certain moments, an issue at work. It doesn't solve everything, but it prepares you for the day. I call it scanning the day or preparing myself for that day. And if you do that regularly, it becomes easier and stuff comes to you as well. For example, I shouldn't do this, and I don't recommend anybody to do it, but I can't help it. I zoom in on Russia. I'm 2 hours away from that war. I zoom in on Russia. I'm 1 hour away from St. Petersburg, and I can't help it but tune into it. I shouldn't do it, but I do it anyway. And at some point, I was zooming in on Putin, on Stockholm, on this heavy cap that he has put as a sort of a power mechanism right on Moscow and the power elite. And it has always felt very, very solid, very strong, very heavy. But recently, I started to feel more fluid. The cap started to move a little bit. And out of the blue, I felt that feeling that north of Moscow, and before that, east of Moscow, in the Far East, I felt like it was like absent, or it's retracting at least, or I felt resistance. And I had that on 2 different occasions. And on those days, either the same day or immediately the day after, there was, I looked the news, and there was either an attack or a revolt, or they attacked, for example, a military camp point for new recruits, or a pro-nationalist journalist got shot in St. Petersburg, north of Moscow. So I felt that coming. And that is what I call unconscious intuition. It just comes to you. It's not proactively, you're not proactively seeking it out, but by proactively seeking out your intuition, asking what's the day look like, what's the month look like, how is this meeting going, what should I do with this person? You are inviting unconscious intuition as well to come to you by dreams, daydreaming, or visions. And it's cunningly accurate. It's not me that's cunningly accurate. It's intuition. And the definition of intuition that I use is felt knowing. And funny enough, when I was doing my research on intuition, I read about a German professor called Gerd Gigerenzer. He is a professor at the Max Planck Institute for Human Behavior in Munich. Has done a lot of research and tests on intuition. And his definition of intuition is felt knowledge. Felt knowledge. Well, mine is felt knowing. It's almost the same. And while we're on it, on defining stuff, if you are doing intuition or receiving intuition, you are called an intuitor. And the act of receiving intuition and knowledge from it, it's called intuiting. I learned that when I read books after I was actually doing it. The scanning the day, I'm sure many of you do something like that, is actually being trained in a way by an American psychologist called Gary Klein. If you haven't heard of him, you can read about him or read his book, The Power of Intuition. He has been training the US Marines, you hear me right, since the 80s on gut-based decision-making. And one of those areas of decision-making was time estimation. So he's been training US Marines on estimating how much time it takes to get through a certain terrain, but also on decision-making in the very moment when data is few and danger is high. Not only did he manage to train them to become actually better at this, but he also was asked to start performing these trainings for other areas like the police corps, doctors, nurses, teachers, and later on even to office folks, white-collar workers. And in those management trainings, he had an exercise called post-mortem training, which basically is asking the managers in that room to start a new project. And when they start that new project, to tell them why that project 5 years later failed. It's a bit of a negative approach, but still, they were transported 5 years into time to look back on the start of this project and to tell them why did it go wrong. And that meant that these managers had to visualize themselves forward in time, looking back, how did it go? Basically, to use the intuition to predict what would go wrong. As an outcome, they got a dummy-proof project, making sure that it didn't go wrong, which was the whole point of it. The act of estimating time, I do that regularly. I ask myself, what time is it now? And I started to feel in, is it 9 o'clock? Is it 8 o'clock? Is it 8:30? And that pendulum, I let it swing in me until it hits somewhere where I feel that inner resonance signature, my inner resonance moment where that silk thread is resonating, is vibrating. When it hits that, then I know, okay, it's 8:30 or 8:32. If you practice that for a while, sometimes you're like 30 minutes off. Don't feel ashamed. Sometimes you are spot on. But the more you do it, the more you narrow that gap of the error of margin. And at some point, you don't need a clock anymore. Time is one of those, when I started to do research on intuition, time is one of those types of intuition the researchers have discovered and have been doing tests on. And while we're on that, I would like to introduce you to a couple of names. And I start off with Antonio Damasio. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He's a Portuguese-American neuroscientist. And he has been doing field research on, well, you could call it emotional intelligence, but he has a theory called the somatic marker theory, which basically, in a nutshell, says that your body tells you earlier than your cognitive awareness is something is dangerous. So a decision, yes or no, a yes-no decision, your body knows before your conscious awareness actually knows. And the act of tuning into your body's signals, how it feels, that is actually the way to speed up your decision-making, but also the quality of your decision-making, because in the same time, he has done research of people that have a brain damage at the amygdala, that don't have access to the emotional intelligence center in their brains. And it turned out that people that don't have access to the amygdala aren't able to make decisions. They can't give a judgment. They can't, throw a ball somewhere and tell, okay, we're going to left or right as a sort of a lottery, but they can't make a judgment. And it's that judgment call that's being supported by emotional intelligence. Your emotions paint your numbers and your events and your historical data. Without emotions, everything is gray, and people without that possibility can't make decisions, not even to go to what restaurants. This is sort of, he's a bit older now, but this is sort of the grandfather of emotional intelligence, the somatic marker theory. And Gary Klein has done research based on Antonio Damasio's work as well. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner for human behavior and decision making, thinking fast, thinking slow, is also basing his work on Antonio Damasio's field research. And that kind of body type of intuition is sort of the beginning. Like Richard Branson says, if it doesn't excite me, I'm not interested. And that is the whole point. Like your body tells you something. If you get drained of energy after meeting somebody, it's a no. It's that simple. If you get energy after us in a certain situation or being with certain people, it's a yes. That's the very, very, very basic language your body uses, even though we have a lot of other bodily language. We also have something called the unconscious thought theory. And there are two people I can mention. One is in Australia, Joel Pearson. He has not only proven that we unconsciously take decisions, but also they're faster and more accurate if they're complex compared to cognitive work, like consciously thinking about something. In those lab theories that he has been, lab tests that he has been doing, you can Google on that yourself. It's Joel Pearson in Australia, 2017, the moving dots test. So people were exposed to lots of moving dots randomly. Unconsciously, when they were looking at a screen, they were confronted with fast-moving pictures laden with emotions, either very positive or very negative. And they were connected to the next dots moving coming up. So after a while, the participants going only on the emotional intelligence would be able to predict what the next slide would be based on those emotionally laden pictures they had received and restored unconsciously. Not only did he prove that it worked and faster than conscious thinking, but also that if you would practice it, if you would do it more often, they would actually get more accurate. So it's trainable. Gary Klein trained on intuition. Joel Pearson proved in a lab test that you can actually get better at intuition when you train it. A very similar set of experiments were done in Holland by Ab Dijksterhuis, also a professor. Very similar. And he has coined, he's built a theory about it, the unconscious thought theory. Basically saying that if the conscious you, if your logical you is occupied with a task, then the unconscious you is freed up. And that's where the power is. So I will move forward. I am a little bit aware of time. I'll forward to I mentioned him already, Gerd Kingerenzer, the German professor for the Max Planck Institute in Munich. In his research, and when I read that for the first time, I got really like, wow, finally. In his research, it has been shown that we humans have intuition in our DNA. It's not as some have it or some don't. It's actually in our DNA. Not only that, we are intuitive beings. We are programmed to act, think, and speak intuitively. So that's why if we are highly intuitive and pushed into this world where we are today, we may not always feel comfortable because it's so logically built. And in our brains, we have a specific place for that. It's called the adaptive toolbox, meaning that throughout the centuries, every single bit of winning strategy that we humans have encountered has been stored in our DNA, accessible in our brains, in the adaptive toolbox. And intuitive strategies were part of that. Winning strategies are being passed on from generation to generation. And when that was pointed out to me, I thought, oh, well, my God, it makes such sense. So even if you are intuitive, for me at least, it has helped to read about scientists and researchers that in a very dry way, using intellectual language, are describing how a feeling works from A to Z. And finally, I would like to wrap up. And Micah, you can say when time is up, but I'm gonna wrap up. I'm gonna introduce you. I have a slide prepared, but I'm going to skip that. I can explain it to you. That's much easier. So when I speak about intuition to people that are intuitively aware, but maybe not using it on a daily basis, or at least not focusing on that much, they may not always be aware that intuition comes in different versions or shapes. For me, intuition is felt knowing, and it's a holistic experience. I'm sure that I'm not the only one here that thinks that. But it doesn't mean it can't come in various ways. So in literature and research, people talk about different types of intuition. And I don't always agree with that. But based on a psychological model that I work with called the Enneagram, there are actually different types of intuition or different channels of intuition. And I will mention them, and then you will be able to make sense of it, I'm sure. So I start with body intuition, which I already mentioned. That's the first one. Then we have gut feeling or stomach area. And the gut feeling is your very, very basic area where something says yes or no. That's why cowboy CEOs in American Hollywood movies always say, I'm going with my gut. And then they say yes or no. And they might be right. I don't know. But it could be wrong as well, depending on how much tuned in they are and how much, how much they take care of the complete picture of intuition. But gut feeling is your yes, no for now. It's not the ultimate yes or no. It's your yes or no in this moment, giving a situation. It's also very clear. And, all of these areas I help in my masterclass, by the way. So I'll dig down deeply in every compartment of intuition. After gut feeling, we have our intuitive heart. This is the area where you have your truth, where you know something is true for you, or when you trust somebody else. And this is often called female intuition, especially when it is to relationships. And I'm sure you're aware of something called the Heart Math Institute in California, whom are doing fantastic research, scientific research on the power of the heart and the magnetic field it creates and how we can tune into others' magnetic fields. That's why that's where empathy comes from. We can literally feel each other through our magnetic fields. I can say a lot more about the Heart Math Institute, but I'm gonna leave it there. And we have our intuitive mind. The name intuitive mind is coined by someone called Einstein, but not just Einstein. Even a man called Salk, Jonas Salk, has been writing a lot about it. And Salk is the inventor of the polio vaccine. But he has written more books about intuition and intuitive mind than he has on polio. And basically, the intuitive mind is a frame to open up towards higher truths, new ideas that are not there yet, and inspiration. And an intuitive thought is very different than a normal thought. It's not leaving you alone. It has the authority to be there, even if you don't want it to be there. It's just chasing you all the time until you listen. There's also there's a book written about it called Blink, in a blink of an eye, from Malcolm Gladwell, if you want to read more about that. And then finally, straight on the top, I call it moral compass, the area of purpose, what you're heading for in life, what's really meaningful to you. Some call that the lead star or lodestar or soul or inner you or the higher you. Some call it intuition, that is intuition, and the rest are merely channels of intuition. In the end, intuition is a holistic experience. But people not following their moral compass become bitter. And people that are simply in tune with their moral compass or following their purpose, or at least giving it an effort, are proven to be more happy. So there's studies on people that are making decisions based on their intuition and people that don't follow the intuition, and how much more satisfied they are over time based on those decisions. And those studies point very clearly that if you follow your intuition as a human being, whether you make the right choices or not, but if you at least give it an effort, you'll become more happy. So if nothing else, it's a better way of living if you ask me. Michael, I would like to thank you for your introduction. And I also would like to say that my website is about intuition. I think you said about tuition. Just like to correct that it's about intuition.com. And with that said, I will leave it. I had a presentation one day where I got confronted by certain members from the audience on intuition, and I was so taken aback by it that I went to went and find sources of intuition. I can, if you spend 30 minutes Googling, just 30 minutes, you don't have to read it, just spend Googling, you will find so many sources of research and science ongoing right now globally. What I've said now is just the tip of the iceberg. It has exploded, and it has exploded after 2008. And the reason for that is that Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Peace Prize winner from 2008, when he published his work, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, he made intuition explode. And the reason is that he's actually skeptical to intuition. He's actually skeptical. He doesn't, but he gave intuition a place in decision-making, not in the beginning, not throughout the process, as many others do, but at the very end. If you are an expert or something, you can, at some point develop intuition. So he's very skeptical to it. But even a man with his stature, of his status, and that has a skeptical approach to intuition, had to acknowledge that it exists and that you can train it. And based on his work, we can see an explosion of other researchers going about working with intuition. So they are catching up. Not yet, quite yet, but they are catching up. And that makes it easier for people like me, and probably for you, to work and talk about intuition, which is exactly what I intend to do. I'm going to talk about intuition, and that's why I start my podcast about intuition. I'm going to talk about it.